How can we as submissives help our dominants through a drop or a spiral? When does it become codependency? Good question. And I see two very distinct questions. So let me start with the first one. How can we as submissives help our dominants through a drop or a spiral? Point number one, a drop and a spiral, I look at as two very different things. I define them as two very different things. A drop being a drop in energy, stamina, creativity, extroversion, whatever after a scene. It's just the natural result of you spending that much energy, you spending that much creative attention on a scene, planning, play, all of that. So I consider a drop to be a very normal thing that honestly, to me, I see drops or a crash from the top side or the bottom side as a way that your nervous system is just re-regulating itself. You know, when we were way up here in subspace, la 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 la, then the crash is just us re-regulating, get back to that grounded place. And, you know, if we as the dominant kind of drop after a scene, you know, then we have to kind of rebuild back up into that open place. And so I think a drop is very different than a spiral. To me, a spiral to me denotes more of a trigger where the dominant got triggered by something, got activated by something. And yes, we do need to get back into a regulated state, but the motivation, the root, the cause driving us to become dysregulated are two very different things. So the strategy for each is going to be different. And, you know, how can a submissive help a dominant through a drop? How can a submissive help their dominant through a spiral? Ask your dominant. That is the best answer that I could give you. Because the only thing that I'm going to be able to tell you is what I would prefer as a dominant. I cannot tell you as a submissive with your dominant what they would want when they are spiraling because of a trigger. I don't know because I have no other context to this. There's so many variables for me to be able to answer this question. So submissives who are wondering this, you know, how can I help my dominant through a drop or a spiral? Ask them, number one. Number two, I just say pay attention to patterns. You know, if you see, yeah, each dom is a person, each person needs different things. Absolutely. And so I would just say pay attention. Pay very close attention to patterns. Pay very close attention to things that your dominant expresses after a scene, expresses when they're stressed, expresses when they're anxious. You know, if you see that after a scene where you feel your dominant is dropping, if you identify that part of that drop includes them just not wanting to really engage, you know? They're still smiling at you. They're still, you know, warm with you. They're not cold and all that, but they're just not engaging with you. They're not talking. They're not really wanting to spend a lot of time with you. Then maybe that's a little bit of a cue for you. And hey, Doms, be humble enough to take the help. Oh, there it is. That's a great point, D. Absolutely. So I would say ask number one, do you want help? It could just be the dominant is dropping. Leave me the fuck alone. Why do you think you need to help me? Just leave me alone and let me go through my process. It could be that. Where you as a submissive are saying my dominant needs help and they don't need help. They just need time and space. And you to go away and be quiet. It could just be that. So I'd start with asking, do you want help? And if so, how do you define help? You know, is you know, when your dominant is spiraling, could help mean more proactive forms of service versus reactive. You know, if they're spiraling, they're in their head, they're super stressed and overwhelmed and processing a whole bunch of really intense triggers or just one really intense trigger, then maybe they don't want to tell you, now go do this, now go do this. Maybe they want you to just step it up and be a little bit more proactive in your service to help them, to support them when they're spiraling. Or the opposite could be. They don't want you to do anything. They want you to just leave them alone. You know what I mean?